Hello everyone, my name is Mr. Miller and this is Mr. Bumbarger, my bow aficionado, and he's going to help us learn about the English longbow. So, Ian, why don't you tell us what is an English longbow?
Well, an English longbow is obviously a bow that was made in England. It's typically thought that it's been since about 10 or 1100, and it was widely used until about 15 or 1600 when guns, arquebuses specifically, began to take over the battlefield.
Okay, so why was English longbow so important in medieval combat?
Well, during medieval combat, two armies would line up and face off with one another. Typically, they had spears and swords and shields. So they would have to close to a very short distance and fight each other.
Okay.
And even when other cultures had bows, traditionally they were pretty weak powered bows. So even if they would have them to use at range, they wouldn't really do anything. They would just bounce off any armor or any shielding that the other army had. Well, the English longbow, at least in Europe, was one of the first bows that was strong enough to punch through shields and armor. So what that gave the advantage to the English was that while their opponents were far away and couldn't reach them, they could start killing the enemy before they even got close.
Okay. Now, what would the English longbow typically be made out of? I see here that it's obviously made out of wood.
So the English longbow would be made out of one piece of wood, and it was a wood called yew, Y-E-W-U. And it was made out of the tree. They would split the tree into maybe 6 pieces. And then the outside of the bow, which is called the back of the bow, would be the outside of the tree. And then they would cut it in kind of a D section to make the belly of the bow. The thing about yew wood is it's very soft. It's very springy, so it makes a good bow, but it's very soft. So they would have to mount cow horn onto the bow so that the string didn't cut through the wood. Most English longbows were roughly as tall as the person that shot them. There have only been a couple longbows found, most of them on a shipwreck actually, but they were anywhere from about 68 to 80 inches long.
Okay, so the bow's made out of wood, yew wood specifically. What about these arrows here?
So the arrows were also made out of wood. They were not made out of yew wood, they were made out of ash wood. They had a metal tip, not dissimilar from this one, called a bodkin usually. They didn't use bladed arrowheads because that wouldn't punch through the armor or the shields as well as the steel tips would. So they typically had a very small steel tip to punch through armor and shielding. On the back side here, they had goose feathers that were cut to about 6 inches, 7 inches, somewhere in there, and then were taken and then were tied on. They weren't necessarily always glued on, they were tied on. And they would tie up through the arrow, and then they would tie around where they would cut the nock. They don't have any kind of nock put on, it's just cut into the wood. Sometimes they would also put cow horn in the nock to make it stronger too.
Okay, so we talked about the bow, we talked about the arrow. I guess the next question would be, how were these used?
Well, let's go out on the range and give it a shot.
All right, Ian, so we're outside on our range in the lovely countryside where no one could possibly be injured. Now, could you explain to us the process of shooting that beautiful English longbow that you made?
So, typically, the archers would set up in a row or a group, and then they would have stakes in front of them to protect them from infantry or cavalry. They would then stick their arrows in the ground like this. They wouldn't keep them in a quiver usually, so that they could grab them quickly in case of an emergency. Also, that had the added benefit of making the arrows dirty, so if they punctured someone, that had the additional benefit of carrying bacterial infections and dirt into the wound. It's not very pretty, but that's how they did it. Now, to shoot this bow, put your arrow on the string. You just shoot off your hand, there's no arrow rest. Pull it to your ear.
Let it rip.
Yep. It's really not too hard. A good archer can shoot maybe somewhere in the range of 20 arrows a minute, whereas a good crossbowman can only shoot 1 or 2. So not only is it more have a great deal farther range than a crossbow, but you can shoot it much faster. The downside is it takes a great deal more practice to be good with it than it does with the crossbow. Well, Tyler, would you like to give her a try?
I would love to give her a try. All right, Ian, so I'm taking a shot with your bow here.
Make sure you put the caulk feather out. That's the different colored feather.
Okay.
And that goes away from the bow.
So I put that like this.
Yep. Put the arrow on the string.
Okay.
And then draw your left hand, your right hand back to your chin.
Okay. And then let her rip?
Yep.
Just like that.
Just like that.
Well, thank you, Ian. I appreciate you teaching us about the longbow and its usefulness in combat, what it's made of, all those things like that. Let's give everyone a hand for Mr. Bumbarger and his excellent bow knowledge.
Well, it was great to be here. I like teaching people about history.
Thank you.